Okay, hopefully all of you, I've got the audio enabled now for us. I'm going to keep you all muted. Hopefully everyone can hear. There's too many of you to try to manage technical issues. So thanks in advance for your understanding. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Nevada Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. By attending today's webinar, licensees will fulfill the PDH requirement for 1 hour to review NRS and NAC Chapter 625. I'm going to try to double duty, click and read at the same time. My name is Derek, and I'll be running the webinar today. Before I introduce our presenter, let me just take care of a few housekeeping items. As I mentioned, we're going to keep you all muted for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions later on and throughout the presentation, just continue to use the chat function. A lot of you are doing that now. I'll do my best to stay on top of it. It can become a little unwieldy, but we'll get to all the questions towards the end of the presentation. You can document, Patty will cover some of this during the presentation, but you can document your participation in this webinar in any fashion you choose. You can take screen grabs of it. You can print out the web page. There's a variety of ways that you can document your participation in this. However, if you would prefer a certificate, I'm going to later in the presentation, I've got some instructions on how to do that. So we'll get to that later on. With that, let me introduce our presenter, Patty Momola. Patty is a licensed civil engineer and the executive director of the Nevada Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. In addition to the day-to-day operations of the board, her duties include working with the board and the legislature to maintain and update the statutes and regulations that govern land surveyors and engineers in the state of Nevada, which is what today's presentation is about. Mm-hmm. Patty, I'll let you take it away.
All right, Derek, I'll give you back the controls then. Welcome, everybody. Just so you know, this meets your 1 hour requirement for continuing education related to Nevada statutes and regulations.
Oh, you get the clicker.
Yeah, I got the clicker. Derek wants me to click to the next slide. And so I want to let you all know that the board periodically does review its regulations, and this last go around started in 2017. So what is that? Five years now. We've been undergoing review of our regulations, and we've updated a significant number of those. And in this latest iteration, when we started this review in 2017, our goal was to look at our regs, see what was obsolete, what needed to be updated for language, what needed to be eliminated, or if we needed anything new. And ideally, it was to remove unnecessary barriers to licensure. And so we're going to go through these. So during the review of the regulations, we reviewed 37. And regulations are Nevada Administrative Code Chapter 625. So we reviewed 37 of them. We amended or updated 32 of those. We repealed or eliminated 5, and we added 1 new one. And we're going to go through those and take a look. And what I would suggest is if any of you have any of this, there's an old law book that looks like this. If you have any of these, throw them away. They don't do you any good because we've made so many changes to them. We've actually over the years updated some of the statutes as well. And we recently got this newly published document as of July or May of 20. Oh, I don't have, this is my old one. If yours says May of 2014 or any other former version, throw that one away. It won't do you any good because they're so outdated. There's been so many changes, but we have a new one, July 2022. Or of course you can go to the online library. If you Google NRS 625, which is the statutes, Nevada revised statutes, or NAC, Nevada Administrative Code 625, you will see what the new regulations are. And I would encourage you to do that. And when you do spend some time doing that, document that as well, because that too will count for a 1 hour of your continuing education requirements for Nevada laws and regulations.
Do you want to mention the web link to the request form?
I
as
will.
well? Okay.
It's later in the presentation.
Okay.
Thanks for the reminder though, Derek. So let's take a look at the regulations then. And they're grouped into 5 categories. And the reason we did that is for our own tracking of regulations. And the first group is going to be we call housekeeping. And in the housekeeping group, those were regulations that talked about how the board administrated the FE and PE exams. The board no longer does that. So those regulations were no longer needed. They needed to be eliminated or they needed to be cleaned up to tell people how to apply or register to take those exams, and then how to apply for licensure. And then also in the housekeeping group is the one new regulation that we added. And that new regulation is related to what we call the double dipping law. At times we had people who would work full time and get a master's degree at the same time. And they would want to count 4 years of experience in a 2-year time period. So while they were working for 2 years, they would also, in that same 2 years, get their master's degree, and they wanted to count that as 4 years. And that was never the intent of the board. The intent of the board always that you needed to have 4 years experience. And in that 4 years experience, you could use a master's degree to count for 2 years. That's so as not to penalize those people that got their master's degree and then went to work. But you still had to meet the 4-year time requirement. You couldn't meet that in a 2-year period. Okay, the next category is continuing education. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. There was 2 regulations associated with the changes we made there. And so I'm going to come back to that one. And then code of conduct. Code of conduct, there was 5 regulations updated, and we mainly updated the language there for relevance. There was some outdated language, and the language needed to reflect how professionals practiced now in modern time. And so we made those changes related to that one. And then the next category is stamping, signing, and submitting of documents. And that was timely because of COVID and the need for electronic stamping and digital signatures. And we're going to talk more about that in this later on in this presentation as well. And then the last category is complaint investigations and disciplinary actions. And the changes we made to that section were to ensure that advisory committees were done in such a manner as to protect a professional's due process rights. The way the language was previously written was an advisory committee was a public meeting. Well, when it becomes a public meeting, it could affect somebody's due process rights. So we updated that language to use advisory committees as an investigative tool, which means they remained confidential. Okay, so let's take a look at a few of those other regulations that I mentioned that we would take a closer look at. The first one is NAC 625-430 related to continuing education. And the next one, NAC 625-470, is also related to continuing education. And we're going to specifically look at the language and the changes there shortly. And then the third one is NAC 625-545, which is about written contracts. And we made one minor modification to that one that I'm going to talk about as well. And then NAC 625-610, which is the stamping, signing, and submitting of documents. And we're going to take a closer look at that one as well. So first off is requirements for renewal of license, which is related to continuing education. So the board had some pretty interesting discussions about whether or not continuing education was helpful, was beneficial to licensees, and whether we should retain that. And the board was pretty split on that. And it's interesting because so were our licensees. There were some pretty strong opinions on either side as to whether we should retain continuing education. and really what it boiled down to was there's no documentation, no evidence to support that continuing education benefits professionals, but then also there's nothing that says it doesn't benefit professionals. And many, many years ago, the board went to bat and said, we believe continuing education is important for our profession. So then how do you go back to the legislature now and say, oh, no, it's not necessary? And where's your documentation or your data to support that it's not needed? And really, like I said, it was a very controversial item. So because of that, the board said, okay, we are not going to do anything to make a change to that. We're going to retain the 30 PDHs for license renewal, but we're going to ease the requirements. And I'm going to talk about that because it's in a separate regulation and shortly. And when they did that, they also said, okay, if we're going to retain those 30 PDHs for license renewal, and license renewal happens on a 2-year period. So you have to have 30 continuing ed units during the 2-year license cycle. And the board also then decided, let's add the requirements then that we have 2 hours in professional ethics and 1 hour must be in provisions of Nevada revised statutes and Nevada Administrative Code Chapter 625. And the reason the board wanted to add those 2 specific items within that 30 hours of continuing ed is the biggest or most frequent complaints the board gets is related to ethics issues. And so it's obvious that professionals need a little more training or education, or at least reminder about professional ethics. And also because we do change the law, and the only time you're required to go look at our statutes and regulations is when you get initially licensed. The board has the 24 questions, which is on Nevada statutes and regulations. And then you really don't have to go look at it again, even though you should, because it does affect how you practice and you could be disciplined if you violate those. And we do our best always, to inform you of what changes we make to statutes and regulations. We put it in our newsletter, we put it on our website, we push it out to you as our professionals. You really should go look at it every now and then to be familiar with the changes. So the board thought it was important enough that they were going to modify the regulations accordingly. And then also as part of that requirement for ethics and training in Nevada statutes and regulations is you can't carry those forward. So you must do those 3 hours every renewal cycle. You can't do 6 hours in this 2-year and then hope to carry the 3 more forward in the next renewal period. You must do 3 hours every time you renew your license, 2 hours of ethics and 1 hour in Nevada law. Okay, so the other part of continuing education is NAC 625-470. So as I said, the board said, let's retain our 30 hours of continuing ed, but let's add these 3 hours specific, but let's add self-study. So in the list of ways to meet the continuing education requirements, the board has now added self-study. And what that means is if you do research on the internet related to how to do your profession better, how to be a better engineer or technical skills or whatever, you can document that and count it. If you watch a YouTube video about something related to your practice of engineering or land surveying, you could take a screenshot of that and document that and include that. So even though we've retained our continuing ed, you can now meet those requirements through self-study. Okay, so the next item I want to talk about, next regulation that I want to highlight is Nevada Administrative Code 625-545. And that has been on our books now for about 10 years, 10, 12 years. I think it was 2010 when we added that, the requirement for a written contract. And that's really important. It not only protects the public, but it also protects you as a professional. And I would encourage you to look at your contracts when you're contracting with a mom and pop or a person of the public who's kind of naive to, professional engineering, professional land surveying. I would encourage you to use plain English in your contracts so they really understand what the deliverables are and the timeframes. Because more often than not, those are the kind of complaints we see is one, people are professionals not having a written contract, or two, there's a vagueness in the contract. And so the client doesn't understand what the deliverables are or when they are. And I want to talk about the recent change that we made to this. So prior, what was required in a contract that's been on the books for a long time is you have a written contract, you include scope, cost, and schedule. The new change that we added was that you must disclose whether you carry professional liability insurance. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to offer it on that project. You can disclose that to the client. Yes, I have professional liability insurance, but it's not applicable to this project. Maybe you're doing some sort of report or study or document that may be only worth $1,500. Maybe you're not going to offer professional liability insurance for that. And the reason we did that again was to protect the public. So the public can make an informed decision whether or not they want to use a professional that doesn't carry professional liability insurance. Okay, so let's talk about NAC 625, 610 then. That's related to stamping, sealing, and signatures on documents. So this is section 1 through 13. So when you look at NAC 625, 610, there's numbers underneath it 1 through 13. So the first change we made was section 3, changes impression to image. Well, we no longer do impressions. We do images of your seal. So it's important to bring that up to date. Section 4 adds adjacent to. I think before the language, well, I know before the language said you must sign across the face of the seal, but you couldn't obliterate it. You had to be able to read what was underlying or sign it in a way that you could still distinguish the information you needed to on the seal. But now you can actually sign your name adjacent to, and really that comes from when you digitally sign, or even when you apply your signature, there's no reason why your signature can't be below, next to. It could be still across the face if you wanted to, but this does clarify the language and allows you to do it adjacent to. And as we go through this, just if you want, you can type your questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. We'll go back and answer those. So section 10 replaces text related to locking a document to tracking changes. The prior language said something about digitally sign and encrypt in a manner that locks a document. Well, that was problematic. And so now the language says, you'll digitally sign and encrypt the document in a manner that allows you to track changes. Okay, and we'll talk probably a little bit more about this shortly. And then section 13 is just some language changes that adds clarity to stamping and sealing submitting documents. And I'm guessing that we'll probably have the most questions about this one when we get to the end, which is totally fine. But because of the concerns related to electronic submittals and digital signatures, the board did create we called it a electronic submittal digital signature task force. And that was made up of public entities, professionals from Northern and Southern Nevada, one board member and myself. And we really worked through the issues related to electronic submittals and digital signature. And kind of baseline starting out is everyone needs to get on the same page and use the right language. Electronic submittal is a document that's created electronically. It stays electronic. It's sent electronically. It's never in paper form. And so you never have the opportunity to have it in paper form where you would sign it. So of course, that's when you would use a digital signature. Whereas paper documents, they're a little bit different. You create them electronically, you print them on paper. I believe most entities still require an ink signature on any paper documents. The outcome of that task force work resulted in a document called the Electronic Submittal and Digital Signature Guide. And that is available on our website. When this is a shot of our website. So if you go to nvbpls.org, under Engineers and Land Surveyors, there's a tab there, Electronic Submittal and Digital Signature Guide. It's available there. And it has some helpful information. And it's written in a manner to be software agnostic. So hopefully you find that as a useful tool. And the agencies have used it. I believe all the agencies now are on the same page with how to do it and how to request electronic submittals and digital signatures. And for the most part, our professionals are up to speed these days too, and are familiar with the process of electronic submittals and digital signatures. So as I said, again, we'll have a chance to talk more about those at the end here, but I want to go now to disciplinary actions and trends, because I think this will be a little insightful on what we see here at the board office. And I can talk about how those regulations I just highlighted factor into some of these disciplinary actions. Okay, so in the past 5 years, on average, the board sees 45 complaints a year. Okay, of those 45 complaints, 15 result in case files. And the difference between those 45 and 15 is threefold. First, the caller or emailer that wants to file a complaint doesn't follow through with filing the complaint. They call us, they talk to us, and then we never see the official complaint. It gets resolved, or they don't want to continue with the process, or the professional does what they say they're going to do and it no longer becomes an issue. So sometimes people just call and want our advice or guidance on an issue they're having with the professional. The other reason it may not result in a complaint is staff are able to mediate and resolve a complainant's to a complainant's satisfaction. But we still reserve the right as board staff to file a complaint on behalf of the board. If a professional does something egregious enough, even though the person calling doesn't want to file a complaint, and we can do a thorough investigation, then as staff, we can file the complaint in lieu of having a member of the public do that. And then there's at times when we initially review a complaint, so a person of the public does file a complaint and we go through it, and it's a monetary dispute. There was no violations of NRS 65 or NAC 65. So there is no complaint and we have to dismiss it. So we can usually quickly resolve 30 of those and be helpful and move things along. Sometimes as board staff, we can pick up a phone to professional and say, hey, your client says you're not communicating with them. Will you just give them a call and, let them know what you're doing? Again, it comes down to misunderstanding what's in the contract. And we can move things along that way. And we do try to do that, resolve complaints at the lowest level possible before it resolves into a formal complaint. So out of those 15 complaints, case files, on average, we end up disciplining 5 professionals, unfortunately. And the most common disciplinary actions we see, or we've seen at least over the last 5 years, are 1, failure to be in responsible charge, 2, not being a faithful agent, and 3, unlicensed practice of engineering or land surveying. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. So first, let's take a look at NRS 625565. And this is a statute, not an administrative code. But we see this at times, the unlawful use of a signature stamp of a professional engineer, professional land surveyor. So it's pretty important to note that any person who violates any provisions of this section is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. Okay. And this violation relates to licensees releasing work that they were not in responsible charge of. So you may have an underling do the work for you, and then you may stamp it and send it out. Well, technically you're not in responsible charge of the work. You're stamping the work, but you're not in responsible charge. You're obligated to thoroughly review that work. And let me give you a couple examples of that. One recently we had a land surveyor who sent a tech out. The tech happened to work for another company, but was moonlighting doing weekend work for this professional land surveyor. And this tech went out and collected all the surveying data, did the map, gave it to the professional land surveyor. The land surveyor stamped it, sent it on the way. Well, it turns out he was off, I don't know, 7 or 8 feet on one of the property lines and 3 or 4 inches vertically up and down. So he totally blew the survey because he didn't review that map. And it cost the owner a lot of money. They had already started construction. They had to change the design, hire a new surveyor to do the layout. So that professional land surveyor was disciplined for violating this statute. Another good example of that was an electrical engineer in Reno, Nevada. And Washoe County School District gave this electrical engineer a couple different sets of drawings from other school electrical designs that had been done as examples. And there's nothing wrong with that because the school district wants some uniformity or standardization in the internet systems, electrical equipment that they're installing in their schools. And so they shared this with the this new firm, this new electrical engineer. Well, the drafter for the company, or a junior engineer, was the story we got from this electrical engineer, just copied and pasted that onto these drawings. And they didn't even bother to change the name of the schools or referring to certain details. And so these details weren't in the plans. It was referring to the wrong schools. This new school that this new electrical engineer was working on was a rehab of an existing one, a total renovation, whereas these other drawings were for new schools. So the drawings didn't even match. Again, that's not being in responsible charge of the work. And so the electrical engineer was disciplined for that. So here's another one that often comes up when considering discipline for our professionals. It's NAC 625-530. This is a regulation. Has to do with relations with employers and clients. So one, act in professional matters as a faithful agent or trustee for each employer or client. And this usually gets used in conjunction with not having a contract, where the client does not understand the what, the when, and how much. So not only do you get disciplined for not having a contract, but you're not acting as a faithful agent because client believes you were supposed to deliver one thing, you delivered something else, and there's no contract. And so, everyone's confused at what you're supposed to be doing on this project. Or there is a contract, but the terms of the contract are not adhered to. The licensee is not doing what they agreed they were going to do. So as I said, licensees are generally not disciplined for not having a contract on its own, but most faithful agent complaints stem from not having a contract, or there's a poorly written contract. And so these two usually go hand in hand. So here's an example of this. I got a couple examples of this too. One is an engineer. He was retained to do a design for a car wash for a client. And he had a contract, and he had a schedule, and he took the money for this design and never delivered the design. And then went radio silent on his client, and his client couldn't get a hold of him. And that resulted in that professional being not only disciplined, but he had to refund the client the money for that design because it was never done. Another one example of that for land surveyor is there was a land surveyor that, and he did not have a contract, committed to doing a map for this property for this real estate agent. And there's something in the statutes, I believe it's NRS 278, that says after you complete a map, you have, I think it's 60 days to file that map with county recorder's office. And 4 months later, there's still no map. And so of course the client is upset, calls the board. We start calling the land surveyor, and he says, yeah, I'll get it done. Yeah, I'll get it done. Another 2 months, he doesn't get it done. And so we open the complaint, and we discipline him. And unfortunately, he doesn't comply either with the terms of his stipulated agreement that he received for being disciplined. And not too long ago, we actually lifted the stay on his license suspension. So his license is currently suspended because it's just a pattern in his behavior of not doing what he's supposed to be doing, unfortunately. And we see that a lot, patterns of bad behavior. So the next statute I want to take a look at is NRS 6225 250, the unlawful practice of engineering. And here's what it says. You can read it for yourselves. And this really is related to offering and providing engineering services without being licensed. And that means doing it when your license is expired, which you shouldn't be doing. If you have an expired license or an inactive license, you cannot offer and provide engineering services. Nor can you, if you're licensed in another state and you want to come work in Nevada, you can't offer or advertise services that you provide in Nevada unless you are licensed. So an example of that was exactly that. We had a licensed, I think he was a structural engineer in Nevada, who let his license lapse, but then continued to practice for 10 years. And nobody caught him until someone in his office realized, they looked him up and said, you're not licensed. And if you don't report this to the board, report yourself to the board, we're going to report you to the board. And he was disciplined for practicing for 10 years without a license. And we had to go back and review. We selected randomly a few of his projects just to make sure he was still competent, because obviously he wasn't doing continuing education either. And so that was just a bad decision that snowballed, that got really bad. Another example of that is we had an Arizona engineer who was retained to do some projects in Nevada. And so one, he shouldn't have been offering to do these projects in Nevada because he wasn't licensed. But once he got the project, was selected for these projects in Nevada, then he started the licensure process, but then he never completed it. All he had to do was pay his license fee and take his 24 questions, and we were licensed. Nevada licenses by comedy really quickly. Once we get your application by comedy, we can license you within 24 hours. But you got to at least pay us and do your 24 questions so we could finish the process. And he never did. Well, the project went sideways and got pretty ugly, and the client was unhappy. And so the client filed a complaint once they realized he wasn't licensed in Nevada. And of course, the guy was disciplined for that, offering and providing services in Nevada without a license. So this is just another continuation of, actions the board can take when you're offering and providing services in Nevada. If you aren't licensed and you are offering services, we can issue an order to cease and desist. And we've had that where some companies have on their website that they, can do this stuff in Nevada, and then they have no Nevada licensed engineers. And we have on occasion gone and sent them a cease and desist letter. We can also get an injunction from district court if we need to. And we have done that many, many years ago. We haven't had to do that in a long time. Usually when we issue a cease and desist letter, they get their act together and, they get somebody licensed and it's not an issue. So now we will open it up for Q&A. And I think Derek was tracking a few questions in the chat. So maybe we can catch those first, Derek.
Absolutely.
And then
I think a couple of them might have been answered already. But one, can you provide an example of contract language for liability insurance disclosure? I don't know. Do you have anything?
I think you could just have a box there that says,
Yes, I do, or no, I don't.
Smith Engineering has professional liability insurance. And then you can check the box or not check the box. I think just something as simple as that. I would talk to, for those of you that have professional liability insurance, whoever your insurance provider is should be able to help you with language that you want to put on your contracts. For those of you that don't, you could just have language in their line that says, Smith Engineering does not carry professional liability insurance. Just a statement such as that.
Yeah, and I think one of the distinctions is we're not saying you have to have insurance. You just have to state whether you do or don't.
That's correct.
And so
yeah, and I want to be clear about that. You're not required to carry professional liability insurance. You're just required to disclose whether you do have it. Okay, so the next one is, do the requirements in 625-545 apply to contracts for work outside the state of Nevada for which a Nevada PE stamp is not to be used? No, but you need to check the laws of that state. I don't know what Arizona or California requires. Most states require that you have a written contract. So I would check those statutes or regulations of that state that you're doing work in. And that's your obligation as a professional to be aware, to know what the laws are in the states that you're licensed and that you're practicing. So I think what is the saying that they say? Ignorance is no excuse, or violating the law, something like that. Okay, so the next question is, does the board have best practices for electronic digital signatures of documents that are to be combined into larger sets and retaining the integrity of the digital signature? Yes, there's different ways to do that. I just did one recently, a portfolio. You can take the electrical engineering drawings and the civil engineering drawings, which are each separate. And if you're the engineer of record, you can create a portfolio with all of those items in there so that all the digital signatures are retained for each of them. What some of the agencies are doing now is having you send them separately at times because the file sizes get too big. If they have a portal where you can upload them, it's easy to do it as a portfolio. What we've also done is you put the image and the signature, the image of your signature and the image of a stamp on every page of the document. You can stitch them together, and then you can just sign a cover page, just sign the cover page and send it that way. And I think you can, if you do it in a manner, depending on the software, I think you can add multiple signatures on that cover page, which is just a separate document.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that guide on our website has some or all of that guidance in it, I think.
Yes, most of that's in the guide. So
Yeah.
take a look at the guide, and then if you still have questions, let us know. And like I said, most of the entities have been doing it for a while now. Not most. There's been a number, some of the bigger agencies, City of Henderson, Clark County. Some agencies aren't going to do it for a while, like City of Sparks. They don't have the equipment for electronic reviews. They don't have the bigger screens, multiple screens. But those agencies that are doing it, that you'll be working with, they've pretty much addressed or had some of these issues, and they can help you answer those when you do your submittals.
For NVB Pals, often field corrections are handled with a cover letter having limited calculations and detail sketches for the corrections attached. The cover letter and the sketches all receive an electronic seal and signature. Which sheet or sheets in such instance require digital signature?
Just the cover requires a digital signature. Obviously, if it's a small enough document, you could digitally seal every page. I mean, if you're talking less than 20 pages or so, the problem with digital signatures on a set, especially big plan sets, is the file size gets so big it can't be transmitted. That's why it's just a requirement that the cover sheet be digitally signed, and the rest of the pages can just be images of the seal and the image of the signature on the rest of the pages. And but like I said, check with the agencies, because sometimes the agencies have unique requirements of how they want to see things. But in this instance that you're describing, only the cover page is required to be digitally signed.
Next question. Are the 2 hours of ethics and the 1 hour of NRS NAC required to be completed for those who have their 2-year renew this year?
Yes.
Yes, but I'm wondering if he might be a new licensee, so his first renewal period.
Yeah. First, if you're newly licensed within the last year, then you're exempt from PDH requirements. But everybody else that is getting their license renewed now, that's been licensed for any period of time, that is required to meet the PDH, must meet this 1 hour of law and 2 hours of ethics requirement.
I'm not sure. Paul Byrne makes a comment here. Maybe refer to Alta and NSPS Table A, option 19 for language. I'm not sure what that's referring
Oh, I
to.
bet you that's professional liability insurance.
okay.
So yeah. So for land surveyors, you may want to go back, Derek, so I can read that. So if you're a land surveyor, the suggestion is to refer to Alta/NSPS, National Society of Professional Surveyors, Table A, option 19 for language. So.
Yeah. Okay. Is offering expert opinions in court about engineered systems considered to be the practice of engineering?
That's a loaded question. What I would say is you are not required to be licensed for expert testimony in a court of law in Nevada. So as a licensed professional anywhere, saying that in a court of law, yeah, it's, you're probably testifying based on engineered systems, but you're not required to be licensed in the state of Nevada for testimony in a court of law. But I would say this, if I was the attorney on the opposing side, I would point out to the jury that you're not licensed in Nevada. So, and you're talking about a Nevada issue. So, but anyways,
Credibility.
We're not going to pursue you because we don't consider that the practice of engineering. And a court can have anybody they want testify as expert witnesses.
Can a board meeting count towards the PDH requirement if it relates to the construction industry? I'm assuming that you mean a different board meeting, a board meeting that's not an NVB Pals board meeting, maybe another board meeting in another industry or other board.
No.
Yeah, if it relates to the construction industry.
No.
I'm guessing it's probably contractors board, maybe.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, it can't. If you attend a Nevada, if you're interested in attending a Nevada board meeting, because that does,
NVB Pals.
NVB Pals, this Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. If you're interested in attending as a guest, let me know and I can send an invite. That does count as continuing education, but that's specific to the practice of engineering and land surveying. And it does benefit you knowing how the board operates and things they talk about and discuss and that kind of thing. So attending a Board of Engineers and Land Surveyors meeting, yes. Attending any other board meeting, no.
Okay. Is there a limit to the amount of self-study hours allowed?
No.
There's not.
I would encourage you not to do it all by self-study, but there's nothing that prohibits you from doing it all as self-study. You know, most people belong to professional societies, you know, lunch and learns. There's a variety that you can get. So
Yeah.
if you want to do it all self-study, yes, you can. I would discourage it. It's better to get it from different sources, but like I said, nothing prohibiting you from doing that.
Is it sufficient to issue a written contract to the client if they do not sign and return the same? So in other words, you issue a contract, but the client doesn't sign it. Is it sufficient to stand as a written contract?
I
If
would
it's not
say
signed?
that it depends. I would say yes, but I do know like some clients, like when you do work for NDOT, they're not going to sign your contract. You have to sign their contract. So we want to see that contract that you signed with the client, and some big developers are that way too. You have to sign their contract. And in those cases, a lot of time you do a proposal. It's important what you put in that proposal. You know, what's your scope of work? How many, you know, what's the not to exceed amount, or your billable rates, or, you know, whatever's in your proposal that gets attached to their contract. So, you know, if you're working with a lay person and they don't sign your contract and send it back, it's like, I don't know, as a business, having been in business myself, I would get that contract back signed. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you know, you can't force somebody to sign something, but then what are you going to do legally if things go sideways and you have to go to civil court to address that if you don't have a signed contract? So I think you're going to need a signed contract.
I want one. This next question, I think this is a good one. If I am renewing for the upcoming 2023-24 licensing period, can I use self-study hours for the 21-22 period?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. But I
Yes.
think what she or he's getting at is, and this is, I get this question on the phone a lot, like when does the clock start ticking? So starting January 1st, if you're renewing by December 31st of this year, really what you want to do is on January 1st, that's when you start accruing PDH hours. And for the next 2 years, by the time that 2 years has passed, you will have earned 30 hours. So
Yeah.
it's
But
kinda
keep
like-
in mind, this regulation has been in effect for a while now. So yes, you can and we've been talking about it for a while. So you should have been aware of it. And so, yes, you can absolutely use self-study in these prior 2-year period if you have it.
Can a PE still qualify for seal, that is issued for bid or issued for planning, not for construction?
Always. You should not be submitting drawings. Even interim drawings submitted to an agency should be stamped and signed by you, but it should be clarified. It should say not for construction, or 30% drawings, or interim drawings, or preliminary drawings, or some sort of clarifying statement. Any document that you submit to a public agency is required to be stamped and signed by you.
Kenneth Erlanger makes a comment, Clark County for Public Works still requires hard copy with wet stamp for civil.
Yeah, they can do that. I'm sorry. And you know, it's still in the regulations. So an agency can require whatever it is that they need. And it's because a lot of them aren't geared up or set up yet to do electronic submittals and digital signatures.
Yeah.
So
It's a related question.
and let me just say this too. You can't print a set of, we've seen people try to put their digital signatures on a drawing, an image of their stamp, a digital signature, and then print it and then turn it in. You can't do that. If you're going to print it to paper, you have to wet sign it. I'm sorry. But if it stays electronic and you're transmitting it electronic, then you would digitally sign that. Digitally signing means when you scroll your mouse over it, you see the metadata. And, you know, otherwise, if you're printing it to paper with a digital signature, it's no longer a digital signature. It's just an image of a digital signature. So I hope that makes sense.
Related question for technical studies, are we also required to provide the stamp and signature image as well as a digital signature for technical studies?
I would say yes. Anytime you submit an engineering or land surveying document to a public agency, you're required to stamp and sign it. So in the technical report, you know, I don't know, when I was in private practice, I only stamped and signed the cover page of that technical document anyways. You don't do it to every page. So I guess I would just do the cover page or the transmittal letter.
Yeah, and I always tell people too, that if they have questions, the entity that you're submitting it to is always a good place to start and ask them specifically what they want.
Yeah, and as long as it doesn't violate
Right.
statute. I mean, you had to be clear. Anything submitted to a public agency should be stamped and sealed by a professional.
Right.
So
What constitutes a digital signature? I frequently see a scan of a person's wet signature applied in PDF form over the engineer seal. Is this acceptable?
no, that is an image of a signature. That is not a digital signature. And that's why I said it's very important that we use the correct terminology. For a long time, people said a digital signature is the same as an image. It is not. It's totally different.
Yeah.
What you just said is an image of a signature. It is not a digital signature.
So Bob Bowles, what I would encourage you to do is go to that digital signature guide on our website. It specifically addresses that question in it and gives you instructions on how to do it and what the difference between an electronic signature versus a digital signature is. So do you put the liability insurance in the proposal is the question.
If you're going to be signing your client's contract, which your proposal becomes an attachment to, which identifies what you're going to do. Yes, I would put it in that proposal. Include the disclosure as whether you have liability insurance in that proposal.
Yeah.
Obviously, if your client, some clients like an NDOT contract or an RTC contract or agency contract of some kind, a city or county, they have stuff in the contract about professional liability. Obviously, if it's already in your client's contract, you don't need to put it in your proposal. But if you're working with a small developer who is insisting you sign their contract and there's no discussion about any type of insurance or professional liability insurance, then yes, you should include it in your proposal. If it's in their contract, then no, you don't need to. It just needs to be in one or the other.
Should the as-built drawings be PE stamped?
No. It's specifically in I think it's in the regulations. I'm pretty sure it's in the regulations and not in statute that as-built drawings are not required to be stamped. And we have had a client on occasion ask for that, and we've had to call them and say, you can't do that. It specifically states that as-built are not, because a lot of times an engineer can't do that. I mean, if you're signing and stamping something, that means you're in responsible charge. A lot of times you have technicians out on the job or the contractors marking on the drawings what's happening during construction. My background is construction management. Even me as a construction manager on the project, I don't see everything that goes on the project. I would never stamp that because I can't 100% say that everything is exactly where it is in the as-built. So no, you should never sign as-built. And if a client ever asks you to, you should say, no, per the regulations, I can't do that.
This is a good one. If you obtained your PE license during the middle of the license period, is the PDH requirement prorated?
No.
Right.
You're exempt your first renewal period from meeting
Exactly.
the PDH requirements.
That's an interesting question because he's referring to the prorated license fee. It's sort of along the same lines like with the PDHs. But no, that's so yeah, you're exempt for that first renewal period. If a document is digitally signed, transmitted to a client, and the client prints it out for use on the job site, does it have to be re-stamped with a wet stamp and signature?
No, it does not. It's no different than when we did them in paper before. You would wet stamp it, wet sign all the drawings. The client would photocopy or mass produce all these and they'd be sent out to the job for construction. No different than that. So no, doesn't have to be. No.
Okay. And I think, and then there was a
once the client accepts it and it's good to go, then, it's okay to issue it as copies.
Okay. I think that was both from Matthew Matthew, but you can use your wet signature scanned as your digital signature representation, right?
No, you're kind of mixing things a little bit. You can you can use your, go back to there, Derek.
Yeah.
You can use your wet signature scanned as the image of your signature, but a digital signature is different.
Yeah. There's a,
I think Adobe calls it e-signature or whatever, but it's different. A digital signature has metadata embedded,
It's
you
a
know, the
little-
time, location of when you digitally sign that document. So yes, you can scan your wet signature and use it as an image of your signature on the drawings, but that is not a digital signature.
Yeah.
And when you digitally sign it, it will include this other little information with it.
it's a little bit of software, encrypted software that goes along with it. It
Yep.
basically verifies that you are who
Who
you
you say
are.
you are, yeah.
Anyway, again, read that digital signature guide on our website because it goes into the technical details on how that works.
Yeah, and before we take this next question, I just remembered because I promised we'd talk about this and we didn't. If you want one of these new Nevada law books that we printed in July 2020, if you go to our website, nvbpels.org, under engineers and land surveyors, there's a
The last thing.
the last tab there. It's order form for Nevada Law Book or Nevada Law Book. You can click on that, fill out a short form. We will mail it to you free of charge. There's no cost. So you just fill out the form and we will mail you a law book. But yeah, any old ones, please throw away. If you want a new one, you can order them free of charge on our website and we'll mail them out to you. Okay, next question.
Regarding PDHs, if you file for renewal in October and then have hours in December, I assume the December hours can be counted for the next renewal period. Is that correct?
Yes, because a carryover.
Yes.
Except for this 1 hour Nevada law and 2 hours of ethics, because those don't carry over.
Right.
Okay.
How to get a certificate of attendance of this PDH? That's, you know what? I can share my screen, or if you want to unhide that
I can
screen.
unhide mine.
Yeah, I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. When we get the next question. How do we request a formal PDH certificate? Okay, there's the same question as the digital signature. Same
Oh,
thing as
sorry.
electronic signature. Again, read that digital signature guide. That explains the difference between a electronic signature and a digital signature. Patty on the screen right now has certificate of completion. There's a lot of ways you can document your participation in this. I realize some of you may be required by your employer, or maybe just for your own records, that you actually need to have some kind of certificate of this presentation. There's a bunch of ways you can do it. You can.
And the easiest way right now is if you're on your computer, hit Control Print Screen,
Yep.
PRTSC. It's on the top, I don't know, in the top row, like fourth or
Mhm.
fifth from the right. So
Right.
Control Print Screen.
If you're on a Mac, you can do it. Let me see. It's Shift Command 3.
Yeah. And if you do that, and then you can paste it into a
Yep.
Word document and then save it.
Or print it, or just
print
save
it,
it as a file, or whatever.
So that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
If you really have difficulties and you really, really want a certificate, you can email board@boe.state.nv.us.
My email's up there too. You can just email me.
Yeah, you can email Derek too.
So this is our second webinar. The first one that we did, I was barraged with people
Yeah.
calling or emailing, asking for certificates. So I was trying to avoid that. But like Patty
And for
said,
us, you don't need one.
Right.
If you just document that you did this on this date, you're fine. So.
Yep.
But if you insist on having one, like I said,
you can, yeah.
if you have Windows or Microsoft, Control Print Screen, Control, and then print screen's on the top row up there.
We'll leave this up for just a couple more minutes here. I think we've got is there any more questions?
I got one more question. Is a digital signature the same thing as electronic signature? No. Digital signature is not the same as electronic signature.
Yeah.
Electronic signature is just an image of your signature.
Mhm.
Digital signature is different. So check our guide, please.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. This would count as 1 hour of law credit. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Count this down. And that's the whole point of the certificate up here. So yeah, you get your 1 hour that's required by
Regulation.
by regulation. Yep.
Yep.
So-
And, we'll do these periodically so that people will have an opportunity. And we're going to post this on our YouTube channel a couple days after this. So tell your friends if anybody missed this and really wanted to see it again. Or if you log off and you realize you want a certificate, you can watch us on YouTube. You can still get a copy of it. And we'll have that up probably Wednesday.
Yep.
Probably end of the day Wednesday.
Give me a couple days to get that up. There's a couple of steps I have to jump through.
And then I would encourage you to, periodically go look at our statutes and regulations online, or if you want a printed book and you get one, familiarize yourself and review them. I only highlighted a few, but we made a considerable number of changes. And it wouldn't hurt you just to go through and make sure you're familiar with them, just to make sure you're not violating any of them.
Yep.
And the website is NV, B as in boy, PELS.org.
Yep.
NV as in Nevada, B as in boy, PELS.org.
Yep.
And then if you look under the engineers and surveyors tab, it's like the last one on after that, last one on that tab.
Yep. And those links to the videos that we just mentioned will be they'll be available on our continuing education page. The same place that had the links to this webinar, it'll be in the same place. So are you offering an ethics course? Yes, tomorrow. And that's again on that continuing education page. The link is there. That is scheduled for tomorrow.
11 to 1.
Yep.
Pacific time, 11 to 1.
Yep.
Okay, we
And
answered
all
that
right.
one.
So Matthew, I think we got the webinar that you're doing this.
Guidelines for how to document our PDHs is in Excel spreadsheet. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, Excel spreadsheet is great. Also, if you have an NCS record, you can track your PDHs for free, your continuing education.
Yep.
They allow you to upload certificates and whatever. That's a great way to track your PDHs too.
Yes.
And it's free.
And if you're ever audited, that's a super, super simple way to provide that to us. Say, just check out my NCS record.
Yeah. And we can log in and look at your stuff on NCS and we'll see it's all there. So it makes it easy for you and makes it easy for us.
Yep.
And somebody just said NCS website works great. So there you go. Try it.
Yeah.
And especially for those licensed in multiple states, it makes it's much easier.
Yes, Timothy.
Oh, 11:30 to 1:30, Derek?
11:30 to 1:30.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was 11 to 1, but you're right. Thank you for the correction. 11:30 to 1:30. Thanks. You're on it.
Yep. Thanks for the webinar format for these admin PDH credits. Perfect. Well, everyone, that brings us to the 1 hour. So
Yep.
if you're couple minutes over the 1 hour, so good on you for hanging in there. Yeah, again, tomorrow's ethics webinar.
11:30 to 1:30.
1:30. And yeah, hope to see you then.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
I think it's to the right, Derek. To the right there.